Senator, thanks for your time today. Can I just start with a few of your thoughts generally, I suppose, on this new team? Any real eyebrow raisers for you?
No real eyebrow raisers. I'm not sure how the Prime Minister decides who to promote and who to demote, but I think in the current environment, one of the criteria that he'd hopefully be relying on is their ability to negotiate with the Senate crossbench. It does seem as if Labor and the Greens are going to oppose everything, so that if they're going to get their legislation through Parliament, then they have to get 6 out of the 8 of us to agree to it. And the ability to do that, the ability to negotiate with the Senate crossbench has been pretty variable. And I'm hoping he took into account, the Prime Minister took into account their likely success at that in deciding who is the best person for each job.
So your negotiations, have they really been, in the most part, with the ministers rather than the Prime Minister's office or the Prime Minister himself? And to that end, you said he hopes that is a key attribute on why they are being decided to be ministers. Have there been some negotiations that haven't been so rosy? Was Peter Dutton someone that you were having difficulty with, for example, on GP co-payment?
No, Peter Dutton was fine. I think he probably gave up early on the $7 co-payment, and I didn't hear from him for a long time. But the contact I had with him was fine. It wasn't a criticism of him. No, I don't like to name names. I had some very strong disagreements with the Attorney General, George Brandis, on his national security legislation. I was opposed to all of that, but he didn't really need my vote because he had Labor on board. So it probably made no difference what my view was. He didn't need to negotiate with me. There's obviously a lot of budget items that are opposed by Labor and the Greens, and they will have to negotiate them through. And so I'm hoping that they've got their best people for that job, because we do need to fix our budget. We're spending way too much money relative to the income that's coming in. Expenditure has to be reduced, taxes can't go up, something's got to be done.
You're probably one of the people a little bit more sympathetic to some of those tough budget messages the government is putting out there. How do they better convince, not necessarily yourself, but someone like Jackie Lambie, Clive Palmer, John Madigan perhaps as well?
Well, I think the solution is to sell the problem, to convince people that we've got a problem. That's something they didn't do when the budget came down in May. They tend to give a press conference, say, things are crooked, we've got to fix it, here's the budget. And people go, I don't believe you. That's still going on. They've made a good start though. This reboot probably began with the MyEFO statement. Both Joe Hockey and Matthias Cormann were out there talking about the budget problem that we've got, and if we don't fix it, what the consequences might be. Now I hope they haven't knocked off for too long, because that message needs to be told and told and told. That's got to get through to the community that we do have a problem, and some sour tasting medicine is required, and there's no escaping it. We can't pretend that we can live beyond our means. I'm hoping that's the case. If they don't do that, if that message doesn't get through to the community, then they're not going to convince the likes of Jackie Lambie and Ricky Muir and the rest of them.
Where do you sit, just quickly, on the issue that's been debated, women in the ministry overall, and the numbers there?
I'm opposed to this idea that women should be there just because they're women. I'd like to see them there on the basis of merit, and I'm hoping that that's the...
But could more be there on merit at the moment? Do you think there's a proportionate number to those that there should be, essentially?
Well, I really only know the women frontbench people from the Senate. I don't know the ones from the House very well at all. And there are some very good performers, female ministers in the Senate. And I think they've got a lot of talent. Now, whether they're better than the people who were given the job, I can't say. I haven't got a basis for comparison. And in any case, my judgment of them as ministers is pretty limited to what I see going on in the Senate. And that's sort of like looking at the tip of an iceberg. There's a lot more beneath the surface than that.
Yeah, OK, fair enough. I'd like to move on just finally to the Sydney siege. You did say in the wake of this that perhaps it might not have happened, and you listed states such as Florida, Texas, Vermont. You said maybe this wouldn't have happened there. You spoke about, obviously, the fact that they do have more of a right there to bear arms. But as a theoretical, if the same man had walked into a cafe in those states, perhaps they could have had a gun, perhaps they could have shot man Monis. But at the same time, couldn't Monis have had an automatic weapon legally in those states and perhaps killed 10 people before anyone could have reached for that said gun?
No, that's not very likely. If you want to kill people, it doesn't really matter much what kind of gun you've got, whether it's a full automatic, semi-automatic or a single shot. Most people can load and fire quick enough to kill a whole lot of people. No, the difference is that in Australia it's not just a matter of guns. That's one issue, but it's anything at all to protect yourself is prohibited. It is not legal to have anything like mace, pepper, a personal taser, a pocket knife, a baton, anything that might have saved somebody in that cafe was all prohibited by law. It wouldn't have been legal for any of those 17 people to have had anything on their possession for their self-defence. Now imagine this. Imagine if one of those hostages had been a plainclothes police officer carrying their police pistol. What would we expect the outcome to have been then? Of course, most people would say, oh, well, they're trained, you know, they would deal with a situation. They would have somehow or other either got the bloke to surrender by pointing their gun at them or shot him, so he could do no more harm. Why then do we say, well, if a police officer is in a position where they can do something like that, why couldn't other people do it? Why do they have to wear a uniform to...
Doesn't it come back to, and I'll just put a couple of stats on the screen, because doesn't it come back when you're talking about specifically gun laws and who can actually carry a gun? When you look at the best example for us, the US versus Australia, the rates you've got of homicide with our gun laws versus them are pretty staggering, really. Overall homicide rates, 0.86 in Australia per 100,000, 10.3 in the States, so a bit more than 10 times. But at 1.09 you can say, so it's about 10 times given whatever year you want. And gun homicide specifically, because the other one was kill rates, well, that's about 30 times in the US. So what you're arguing is a hypothetical, and I agree that in that situation perhaps a police officer could have done the right thing. Perhaps a civilian even could have done that and stopped it happening. But the overall numbers, the impact that whole policy has on a whole country is a bit different, isn't it?
Well, I don't think you can compare Australia to America from many reasons, including their attitudes to crime. There's all sorts of factors involved in that. But you can't really talk about America in some kind of homogenous, uniform fashion. It's not. It's 50 different countries, really, all amalgamated together. Now, take one of those, the state of Vermont. The state of Vermont does not even require you to have a licence to own any sort of firearm. No licence whatsoever. Anybody can buy any kind of firearm other than full automatics because they're covered by federal law. But under state law, anybody can own any kind of firearm. So theoretically, in a cafe situation like that, all 17 people might have had a firearm and they wouldn't have needed a permit or a licence or anything, unlike the 40 other odd states where you do need permits to have pistols for self-defence. Now, the important point is this. In Vermont, the rate of homicides, including guns, is lower than in Australia. So it is not a simple equation of more guns equals more homicides, more deaths. It is not that. It's a complicated, complex issue. All sorts of cultural issues, drugs are a major factor. It's a very complicated story, and to just say, oh, it's all about more guns equals more crime, Vermont just proves that that's not the case.
Okay, well, I'm sure you've certainly kicked off the debate over the last few days, but as ever, Senator David Leyonhjelm, thanks for your time today on Sky News.
My pleasure.